What's up guys, Cover here. I just wanted to show you this quick little video. Just had the idea while I was doing this, but this is about part modding, and mainly this only works if you're going to be painting your pieces, but even if you're not painting them like I do, where they're really detailed like miniatures and everything, you could always just find the blue spray paint that matches this blue color or whatever color you're doing. Just find the best match for spray paint if you're going to be modding pieces, cutting anything off, stuff like that, so that you can repaint your pieces to look just like they were before, except a little more realistic or whatever you wanted to do to them. And right now is regarding the French. So I've looked all over the place for French pieces, and Historical Board Gaming just released their 3D printed French set that's been on hold for a really long time, but since I already own Axes and Allies 1940, I pretty much have, like, I've got all the Air Force that represent French pieces well enough. I've got all of the ships, which I looked online, and a lot of the Soviet ships that come with the game for the French look a lot like, pretty much almost completely like the French ships that they're representing. So there was just a few pieces that I would have needed, such as tanks, because I didn't want the T-43s as French tanks, and a few other things like the bombers and the Dunkirk battleship. So that would have, even though they would have been really cool looking replacements being 3D printed and everything, I would have been paying $40 for probably, and only been using really the tanks and the battleship and aircraft carriers. So what I decided to do, and I've mentioned this before in this website called Thingiverse, which has a ton of 3D models and everything. There's this one guy that has free files, so if there's some kind of print shop that has a 3D printer available, or like me, where my school has one available, he's got a ton of free files on hundreds of, maybe even thousands of World War II and a few modern tank designs that are 3D printable. So I advise you check that out. I'm going to have to find a link for some of his things in the, put it in the description below. But right now I just wanted to show you some really simple things that you could do if you're not a big piece buyer or anything, or you can't find pieces that you want to have. This is really, like, if you want to do this, I'd suggest you have some kind of, these are or like wire clippers, but you could probably use something like tweezers, and even, it's going to sound weird, but toenail clippers or finger clippers would work pretty well. They're fairly sharp, and you can get them in tight spaces like on these models. So yeah, I'll go over a couple of things I already did already, where, as most of you know, I'm building my piece collections so that I can play Global War 1936. So, and one of those was the Spanish, and they have Historical Board Gaming, again, has a really large Spanish set that's pretty cool, but it's been out of stock for a really long time, and I've already bought all of the neutrals needed to fill up the French Civil War set, so now all I need is the markers for it. But one of the things that came with the French set was a 3D printed battleship named the España class battleship, and it was used in the Spanish Civil War. And at first I was going to do what I did with Turkey over here, where I was just going to be using this original Axes and Allies 1942 battleship piece, which I thought worked pretty well. But what I've decided to do instead, after looking online, was actually make my own España class battleship. And since I'm going to be replacing the French ships, or the French battleships, I decided I would just use the surplus French battleships that I had. And this pretty much perfectly represents the Hispania class, except for the fact that those two center guns should be on each side. So like that one right there should be pushed off to the side, and then that one right there should be pushed off to the side. It's kind of a weird setup, but it was built in the early 1900s when people didn't really know a lot about battleship building. So what I've done to these is I've grinded down the front a little bit. I've snipped off a few of the pieces, and if you look at your, if you're wanting to do this, you can just look up pictures of the Hispania class battleship, like either blueprints or pictures of it, and just compare it to the Russian ship and see how there's a smokestack on the Russian ship and a couple little fire control stations over here that I clipped off, and those lighter blue areas are just going to get painted over in the end. So I'm happy with that. And the Spanish Civil War set only gives you one for the Republicans, but the thing is that there was two in the war, one on the Republicans and one for the Nationalists. And the Spanish Civil War is already so bent towards the Republicans winning that I decided to make another one so that I could give it to the Nationalist Army. So yeah, replacing my French battleship will be this. It is the Dunkirk class battleship, and this is just a Yamato piece that I trimmed the top a little bit and a few little smokestack pieces. I've shaved down the back quite a bit. I still need to finish up the sanding just to get it perfectly symmetrical. And the back got shaved off a lot. But I was looking at pictures and there was a lot of similarities between these two ships, the Yamato and the Dunkirk. Aside from how big the Yamato was, there was the two cannons in the front. You can't really see it, but right there were two smaller kind of cruiser turrets. And this turret wouldn't have been there on the Dunkirk, but it did look like one of the little the design that was on the back of the ship, the deck design. So I'll probably paint over that with a wooden wooden paint, something like that. Next up would be the aircraft carriers, and as you can see here is an unmodified French aircraft carrier, which is also the Russian aircraft carrier. And the French actually did have an aircraft carrier in World War II, and they did use it a little bit. And I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but it was the Bren or the Bern. And so this is my adaptation of it. So basically what I've done is it's considerably smaller now. And you can see I've shaved off about 1/4 of an inch off the back and rounded it. I also tapered it towards the top like it is in real life. I pinched the nose in with sandpaper just to represent that better. And in French aircraft carrier has a deck in the front of it, or like the bridge in the front and then a smokestack in the rear. They're separated. The Russian aircraft carrier didn't have this, so I just used the wire clippers and clipped out a little notch there. So I still have to sand this one down. And then my last modification was to the Russian heavy bomber here. And again, France won't be building a ton of these pieces in game, but when they do, it is kind of cool to just have their own pieces, even just to look at them when you hand them off to a friend and they've got all different types of planes than the guy sitting next to them. And what I did to this, I did not look up the name of this, but this is a common, French heavy bomber during the war. I still need to fix that wing, but it was a 2-engine bomber, so I clipped off the outer engines on the other one. Didn't modify the tail or anything else. It was just that they had shorter, more square wings. So, yeah. And then basically, I mean, that's pretty much it. Just it's pretty simple to do something like this, and it doesn't even have to be the French. You could do it to any other pieces that you wanted to do it to. You could clip things off of American tanks to make them. You could make Sherman barrels smaller to make them look a little more realistic, and then have the longer versions be the Sherman Fireflies. Uh, yeah, there's just a lot of things that you can do to modify pieces to just make them look a little bit different from the one sitting next to it. So I hope you enjoyed this little look into some of the modifications I do to my pieces, and see you again. Cobra, out.